Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new sort of foray for myself. I would like to make more content. I bought some cool new hardware so I can make that content, as you're seeing right now. And as a result, I wanted to sort of go over a deck list rundown from the Syracuse Open to talk about Standard, how Dragons of Tarkir is impacting it, and ultimately try to bring you guys some more content. I hear, and I have heard for many, many years, that you guys would love to have more things and more stuff from me, so this is a attempt to do that. So as you can see, this is very much a sort of streaming setup, and I will be doing more streaming on my Twitch channel, and I'll be getting to that later. But anyway, so welcome to this piece of content and my man cave, which is really sweet. You'll be seeing more of that. Anyway, so here we see Chris Van Meter has won the Syracuse Open. So let's talk about the Syracuse deck lists, what they're doing, and how well they did. And we're just going to be talking about Standard today, and if this is popular and we can talk about it, maybe Legacy and Modern can go in there too, but let's just get started. So first up is his Green Red Aggro list that won the entire event. It is a sort of an aggro, but more like a ramp style. You know, I'm not exactly sure if I agree 100% with the aggro moniker, but it is a thing. Ash Cloud Phoenix is really sweet. We initially took a pie bet, as I recall, on this, and I believe I lost this one. But it was, you know, it was a cool card, and it was off the back of the other Phoenix from Born of the Gods that was absolutely terrible. Anyway, so you have your Elvish Mystic to ramp up. You have your Stormbreath Dragons and Chris Van Meter and Stormbreath Dragon. You know, they're the BFFs. You have your Sylvan Caryatid, which is able to, again, ramp you. So you're going Mystic into Sylvan Caryatid, into Courser of Crufix. And then you kind of have, you know, your payoffs, which is the Stormbreath, as I'd already mentioned previously. You have Thunderbreak Regent, which is a huge card that came out that sort of debuted from Dragons of Tarkir. And I'm not really sure it took this long for people to realize this card was awesome. I don't really understand it. It seemed completely ridiculous from the moment I saw it. But hey, now it's in the playlist of the winning deck. So all of a sudden, it's like worth a whole lot more than it used to be, which is great. Courser obviously is still fantastic, but you're able to ramp into Dragon Lord Atarka. This thing is an absolute house, as I described in the Magic Show, a flying house. It's got wings and everything. It is super sweet. It is amazing. It like just rocks the board every time it hits it. Xenagos the Reveler has gotten a lot better. I think just being able to produce threat after threat every turn, being able to ramp up into these huge monstrous creatures is really sweet. Another card I wanted to point out specifically was Haven of the Spirit Dragon. This card is really sweet, and I really think kind of snuck up on everybody because it gives you such amazing late game play, because even if they answer something for the first time, they may not be able to answer it the second time. And even if they do, you should be able to get a swing in with Stormbreath Dragon. You should be able to get a bolt in from Thunderbreak Regent if they kill it. And Dragon Lord Atarka still has its Enter the Battlefield ability, which is great. Over here you have Draconic Roar, which I think is a huge breakout card from Dragons of Tarkir. These dragons, like if you control a dragon and if you reveal a dragon cards, are super sweet. Like they have played out even better than I imagined. And as a result, I think they're super cool. They're super playable. This one in particular has just become a premium uncommon. It's going to be worth a bunch of money. The foils are going to be really expensive until the entire Standard rotates this stuff out, which will be a while. I think Crater's Claws is starting to see a lot more play, which I think is really cool. Sort of like a fireball with a bonus, which is really nice. It took a long time for this to start to see play, but now that it's here, it's great. Another Dragons of Tarkir card, of course, Roast, one of the most efficient burn spells, removal spells ever printed, which is really sweet. You have your Arbor Colossus in the sideboard, which can destroy, you know, your big crazy flyers. Your Hornet's Nest, which is great against, you know, decks that want to attack you for infinite damage and whatnot. Destructive Revelry, destroy things like Mastery of the Unseen, which I'm so glad that's hated out of the format, because oh my god, the end of Grand Prix Miami, like, I mean, you know, like, what are you gonna do, man? Like, these games went forever. It was ridiculous. I'm glad we now have cards, and the metagame has kind of shifted to hate that crap out, which is terrible. Wild Slash, of course, kills you know, aggro, little dudes, helps with heroic, helps with most aggro strategies. Pyromaster is great against its tokens. It's usually better against control. Missile Worldwaker, great Planeswalker against control. Mob Rule, really interesting card. I can imagine this is against token strategies. It's sort of like 6 mana win the game, sounds like. Or maybe it helps with Heroic. I would like to sort of see Chris's thoughts on this, which I think could be really interesting. Roast again, amazingly efficient removal spell. And again, there's a big one. Seismic Rupture. This card is really cool because it destroys all the tokens, but more importantly, it destroys all the manifests. So you don't just get run over by Mastery of the Unseen or Whisperwood Elemental. You can destroy all those guys all at once. Destroys morphs, obviously, which are manifests in and of themselves. Super cool. Great deck. Congratulations to Chris. I love it. He finally, was rocking the Stormbreath Dragons again, and it was great. Jesse Grogan played Abzan Aggro. So these are just, green, white, black, aggressive creatures. It's been around for a little while now. Fleece mainline, which I love. I love the fact that this guy has starting to see just infinite play over the past couple months, which is great. Death Dealer was great from the moment I saw him, and obviously Siege Rhino is Siege Rhino. Like, they basically printed like an answer, and then in the following set of Valor Stance, and then the new one, they're like, all right, Roast, here, just go. And here's all these like hateful sideboard cards that kill it too. Wingmate Rock, my spoiler, totally sweet. Love it. You have your Anafin as the foremost, a monstrous 3-mana 4/4. Bramaz, King of Oreskos. Is it just me, or like it's done well? Couldn't it have done a little bit better? Couldn't it have just gone a little bit further? I expected this guy to be like ridiculous in all sorts of decks, and he kind of like started a little slow, and then he's kind of still a little bit slow, which is a little weird for me. Now Tassiger is amazing. This guy is nuts, and I hate that no matter how you looked at the Delve cards, at least me and Brad when we were doing the set review, it just sucked that they just never. We never knew. It was just like, what? If this card costs like minus all the Delve, like 1 black. How insane is this guy? This card is ridiculous. Like, this card is starting to see some legacy play. I absolutely expect it to rock there, and especially modern. I feel like this card just has infinite growth. Like, this is one of those like undercosted cards, probably ultimately in the long term like a mistake-ish, but like when this guy works, it's really crazy good. Absolutely amazing. So in the lands, nothing too surprising there. You have your Boblights, you need your spot removal and whatnot. Dromoka's Command, which I actually saw a ton of play this past weekend, at least in the coverage that I saw, did an infinite amount of work. This card is great. It also helps just hating against Mastery of the Unseen, which I'm, partly was glad that it became a standard archetype, which is really cool. Like, card out of nowhere, really sweet, like no one expected it, yada yada. And then it kind of became really miserable because like it led to 3-hour games that made you want to slit your wrist. Whatever, but this is a card that can answer that stuff, and that's fantastic. Obviously, Hero's Downfall is just destroy target thing that you hate. Valor Stance has all sorts of options, and of course Thoughtseize is Thoughtseize is just like the best card in Standard usually when it's in Standard. I mean, sort of overall, because it's always good, and it always does something great, generally. Back to Nature, by Master of the Unseen, by Jeskai Ascendancy, destroys a bunch of stuff. The other 2 Dromoka's commands sort of fill them out, which is fantastic. You have Removal and Murderous Cut and Valor Stance, Elspeth and Liliana Vest for your control matchups. You have Nissa Worldwaker, who is super powerful. Drown in Sorrow, which is obviously destroying all the tokens and whatnot, and the manifests. Duress is sweet against the control matchups. You see how I sort of have that auto card thing that kind of pops up? It's a plugin I have that kind of loads cards when they... Anyway. Not important. Glare of Heresy is a great card. Exiles Siege Rhino and Elspeth, a Wingmate Rock or whatever, just all the things. And of course your 4th Thoughtseize when you need to, to sort of clear up the board that way. Sorin Solemn Visitor. I'm glad I moused over that, so I didn't forget it. This guy has seen like a little bit of play, and then like people stop playing him, and then people play him, and they stop playing him. Like, they have this kind of love-hate thing with Sorin. He's generally super good, but he gets sort of left behind often. Temur Aggro, this deck is like, oh man, this deck is sweet. It runs a ton of just like butt-kicking cards, absolutely. Like, Heir of the Wilds is great. I didn't really see this one seeing as much constructed play as it has, but a 2/2 Death Toucher for 2 is just really good. The Ferocious bonus is fantastic. It's really interesting, however, how Heir of the Wilds interacts with Surok the Hunt Caller, new card from Dragons, super awesome. Surok in combination with Heir, well, it will give Heir of the Wilds the bonus. It will give it the Ferocious bonus because Surok has 5 power, but it won't give Surok haste because it has to have 8 power on the board by the time he's on it. So that's something I kind of saw come up. But 3 Frostwalker people, with no Cunning Spark Mage and no sort of easy way to target this thing without using a spell. I think this is really cool and some really sweet technology. I've heard people running this guy in cubes. This guy seems super sweet. He's very pushed for a blue card. The Phantasmal creatures, I mean, even the Phantasmal Bears, for God's sake, were like winning tournaments back in the day. So like, being able to have a creature that requires a spell or a trade in order to, be dealt with is important, and Frostwalker kind of really epitomizes that. You have the Ashcloud Phoenix just kind of sticking the dagger in because I got it wrong. Elvish Mystic is Elvish Mystic. Like, this is a card that I expect Wizards to kind of keep in the format all the time because it's great. It's always sweet. It tells sort of what green can do. Green always gets the advantage in mana, and those just kind of jump the curve against other decks, and they kind of have to sort of like respond to you that way. That way you can get turn 2 Goblin Rabblemasters, which are ridiculously powerful and can win the game on their own. Savage Knuckleblade, Big Nux. Big Nux needs some love, man. Big Nux needed more love than I think he's ultimately getting. And as a result, it's really great to see 4 of him making the top 4. Super sweet. You have your Stormbreath Dragon, which has been just fantastic ever since the debut. Like, the card's been great. Just won the tournament, obviously. And Thunderbreak Regent, again, seeing a bunch of copies in top 8. It's doing super well. Boon Satyr is great. I always expect this card to see a ton more play than it did, or that it is, honestly. Like, I'm over here like, okay, sweet, Boon Satyr, oh my god, Boon Satyr, and we'll see like maybe a few copies next week in top 8. It's sort of how it always goes. I'm just like, Boon Satyr is sweet and is super powerful, so let's take a look at like how it's going to be everywhere in the green to red decks next week, and it just ain't. Crater's Claws, however, is starting to see tons and tons of play. Let's take a look at this pricing for this guy real fast. Like, it's like $1.16. I'm just going to say, on sale even, I'm just saying, card seems like a pretty good steal at $1.16. Whatever. Lightning Strike is obviously great. Just, good old-fashioned targeted removal. On the sideboard, you're starting to see sort of the same copies of cards, these Hornet Nests and things. Destructive Revelry, Disdainful Stroke, which is countering all sorts of powerful cards like the other ones we saw, like Stormbreath. It counters even Thunderbreak Regent. It counters Dragon Lords of all shapes and sizes that we'll kind of get to. Feed the Clan. I love seeing this because, me and Brad made a big point about how life gain is terrible and it never hits constructed and blah, blah, blah. But, gaining 10 life is a whole bunch. And turns out gaining 10 life is not sort of just quite a time walk, but also really can sometimes buy you 2 turns or more, particularly if you're chump blocking in some way. It's just one of those good old-fashioned underestimates. And I really think kind of shows that they push life gain far enough for it actually to matter. And we now have a line in which we can say, okay, life gain has to be like here. Sort of like, I think it's like 7 life when it was Primal Command, and now it's like 10 life for Feed the Clan. And if it's in that range, it could see play. Which I think is really sweet. Stubborn Denial is very stubborn. It helps against blue-black control. It helps against decks that are trying to spot remove you to death, and can just counter all the things easily for 1 blue mana. Surak Dragonclaw, isn't that awesome? Guy is so sweet. I love it. We're going to see more of him in a minute, which is even more exciting. But this guy is crazy powerful. I love seeing him in here. Makes me so happy. Like, I love that guy from the second I saw him in cons, and I'm so glad he's seeing just a little bit of play, which is fine. Fine with me. Like, obviously he's great against counter decks, and he's sort of blue-black control, and he blue-white control, and he Bant whatever. Like, very, very good. Barrage of Boulders is a card that is seen often against the token decks. They often kind of want to sweep away those things with this kind of card, but I think Chris had a better idea with his 3-mana sweeper, which was better. And of course, Roast is super efficient. So high five. All right, so let's look at Mono Red Aggro. Mono Red, baby, you can't go wrong with Mono Red. It's really hard to screw up Mono Red. It's really difficult to build it, but it's hard to just say, I've got all these sweet red cards and they are as efficient as they can be at these things. So let's take a look at them. Now, Foundry Street Denizen is a card that never really kind of jumps out at you as like, wow, that's a big constructed worthy card, it's a 1-mana 1/1 that might actually get a bonus sometimes, but it's really, really good when you pair it with Dragon Fodder on turn 2 and Horden Outburst on turn 3. So all of a sudden you can start swinging them for just a ton of damage out of nowhere. And obviously it also works with Goblin Rabblemaster when it makes those tokens. So this guy he does a lot more work than you kind of give him credit for, I think, at first. And Goblin Heel Cutter, I love the guy. I love to see him play. I think it's super powerful. The ability to make things not block is great. Being able to dash it out, even better. Speaking of dashing out, Lightning Berserker, seriously, this card was pushed from the second I saw it. I was like, oh my god. A 1-drop with fire breathing. That's all, dude. I was in. I was sold. You didn't have to keep going. I'm there. I'm in for this. And the ability to dash it out is just so sweet. You just have this fireball on a stick. It's just like, can you deal with it? All right, I'm gonna pick it back up. Can you deal with it? All right, I'm gonna pick it back up. And they're just gonna have to do something, or they're going to lose to it. Mardu Scout, that's my boy on the surfboard. Super sweet card. I love the design. I love the numbers on it. I think it's super powerful. Monastery Swift Spear You know, this is a great card. I love the fact that it's seeing so much legacy play. I love that it saw legacy play like literally from the weekend it was viable. From the weekend that you could play it, it was in the very first place deck, and I love it. Zergo Bell Striker is awesome, but Goblin Guide, it is not. First of all, Goblin Guide was probably too good. But really, Zergo Bell Striker is here and will almost always be seen as a 3 of, because drawing 2 of this guy in your opening hand is just the most miserable experience, and you have the highest percentage chance, of course, if you're running 4 of them, more than 3 of them. Math. But regardless, you know, you have, I really think the split between Dragon Fodders and Hordling Outburst is really interesting. Roast is like sort of like a one of, just like this, you know, sort of like lucky draw. You're just like, oh, kill this big thing that was going to stop me, and now it can't stop me. Lightning Strike is Lightning Bolt as close as you're going to get, and as close as they're going to give you, and Searing Blood is just good old-fashioned value. Stoke the Flames is the best it's the best burn spell in Standard, so you can't really not run 4 of it. Wild Slash, it's really interesting to me that, like, it's cool that it has a ferocious ability. It's nice, but it's not really necessary. It's really sort of extraneous that it has this ferocious thing. And if you saw the article where they were explaining it and talking about it, they're just like, yeah, they were going to put shock in the set. And then they were like, well, you know, these random like turbo fog decks, these decks that try to prevent damage every turn, you know, like play a card that says prevent all damage by creatures, prevent all damage dealt to you. Like, you know, those decks can be viable if you put enough of those spells in Standard with enough card draw and enough sort of like ability to stop things and gain life. So that's why it has that weird ability. And otherwise it's just shock. It just kills stuff and it just deals 2 damage to the face. So it kind of has that second ability just, you know, because it can maybe hate out this thing. But I like how it, you know, like it kind of hoses protection from X cards or protection from, you know, this color or that color, which is nice. You know, it does have some really narrow uses in that regard, but it's really sweet. So anyway, in the sideboard, you have your other 2 Mardu Scouts, which are obviously they get way better against counterspell decks because you can just like keep dashing them in when they're trying to Crux of Fate you and whatnot. Vault Breaker is really interesting. I mean, for me, it appears obviously if you're able to dash it in against, you know, removal heavy decks and be able to start looting or really start filtering because it's red, you have to discard a card first and then draw a card. So you're not really sort of drawing it first and then getting rid of something. You're just getting rid of something and then drawing a replacement. Anyway, important distinction. Outpost Siege obviously is a great source of card advantage. It allows you to get a lot of depth and sort of a lot of reach against a lot of decks, particularly the control variety. Searing Blood is great against creature decks, like, you know, kill your dude and smack you in the face is super powerful. There's no 2 ways about it. Harness by Force is great against the green-red aggro, you know, what's sort of they call aggro, green-red ramp decks. You know, it's like, oh, sweet, like you finally got your Dragon Lord of Tarka online. Thanks. Thank you. It's mine now. It's mine. It's great. Roast is Roast. It's super efficient, and you can't sort of knock the fact that like 2 mana for red really just kill almost everything in Standard, really everything that you care about, because if you're getting to the point where they're like, you know, like slamming Dragon Lord Silent Guards and Dragon Lord of Tarkas, like you might have lost the game at that point. So it's important to have these 2 mana removal spells at the ready to hit them as hard as you can, as fast as you can. Scouring Sands, you kind of see this Barrage of Boulders Scouring Sands thing where they're really just trying to deal 1 damage to all the stupid tokens, and this one gives a little bonus, which is nice. And it's only 2 mana, which is also important. The other cards that we talked about, even Chris's sideboard options, were 3 mana. So being 2 mana is important. Being able to scry, woo, you know, that's terrific. But Mono Red Aggro, super cool deck. I love how it's very difficult to pilot correctly. It looks like it's really simple, and it never really is. There's so many decision trees that kind of spiral out from this type of deck. You should really try and kind of, you know, I personally respect it a lot for those who can play it well. Obviously, Patrick Sullivan has sort of been known as the red deck player, and when you see him playing this deck, and I've seen him, you know, on coverage of various tournaments over the years, and you see him do it well, there's just like, it's just a finesse that is so difficult to really appreciate until you kind of see the nuances in it in the actual matches. So Ryan Sandrin, let's take a look at his red-green aggro list, and now it is, you see the big R there, like they're not kidding. This is really a mono red deck with 1 green card, and that is a Tarkus Command. Now this card is sweet. It stops opponents from gaining life, it deals them 3 in the face, it pumps your whole team, which is probably its most used option, is pumping the whole team and dealing 3 to the face. That can just end games, man. If you're just like 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, kill that, hit you, burn spell, Atarka's Command, blood, like they could just die. It's fantastic. This card is great with Dragon Fodder, 4 Whirling Outbursts. Like, you're going to have the max amount of dudes to be able to throw down Atarka's Command and make them suffer. That is awesome. We have basically very, very similar to the first list of creatures. However, we do have 1 Fire Drinker Satyr. This guy is kind of dangerous in a way, because you can just kind of get blown out. Obviously, like, once they kind of lay a Siege Rhino, you really kind of have to stop attacking at that point. That's the thing. But it's really cool. Like, again, even in the sideboard, it's just mono red with the Atarka's Command. Eidolon of the Great Revel, awesome card. Going to have amazing longevity. That card is going to be super powerful in Modern, super powerful in Legacy. And I think we're just now seeing, sort of what can happen when they put really powerful enchantments on a creature. Sulfuric Vortex was amazingly powerful, and that was an enchantment, so it was a lot harder to get rid of. It's a little bit more expensive. Now you have a 2/2 for 2 that has that ability, and that's super good, as we have found out. Moving through Standard, obviously Searing Blood, great against creature decks. Arc Lightning, great against token decks. Magmatic Chasm, this is sort of, like, if you're like against the green decks, when they kind of gum up the ground, with their Sylvan Caryatids and of course their Crufix and whatever, and you're just like, sometimes you can get stuck behind this wall of like infinite toughness, and so sometimes you're like, you know what, you're just not blocking right now, and I'm just going to smash your face and Atarka's Command and kill you, which I think is great. Obviously, Roast, as we discussed, kills a thing as efficiently as Red has ever seen it, and that is not unnoticed. We have here Green Red Aggro from Stephen Rice. Let's see if this is similar to Chris's list. However, this is really Temur Aggro. I say that because you have here Surrak Dragonclaw. Now, did they mean to put... I believe that this is a mistake. This should be Surrak the Hunt Caller, because there's no way you can actually cast that card other than like a few mana confluence. But let's face it, I don't really think that was the reason. I was discussing this earlier. That's actually when I got really excited. I was like, oh man, Surrak Dragonclaw, I saw 3 of in the top 8 deck. This is unbelievable. But like 3/5 drops that you don't really, you're not really able to play. I mean, maybe. Rattleclaw Mystic is a thing that makes that blue mana. I don't know, Mana Confluence makes it. I'm not really sure at this point. It feels like a mistake, but maybe it's not. Because if it's not, oh my god, I love it. I totally love it. I'm glad this guy's seeing play. I love Dragonclaw from the moment I saw it. You can go back and watch my Magic show. I was flipping out over this card. I love it. Draconic Roar shows up again. Yes, card is super sweet. Now, he only plays 2 here. I think people are going to play 4 in the future. This card is super powerful. It seems to be pretty easy to get a dragon in your hand or in play. That's the real killer. It's not just in hand, because if it was just in hand, these cards wouldn't be anywhere near how good they are now. But if it's in hand or in play, you always get the bonus, and that is fantastic. Crater's Claws, again, like, we're just starting to see like infinite copies of Crater's Claws in all of these decks. Every single one of them are running 4s over and over and over again. And of course, hey, Roast, said enough about that. But Heir of the Wilds, it's really cool as a 1-of, right? Like, it's just sort of a 1 random duder guy. Hornet Nest, which blocks all the huge monsters and all the huge dragons and things of that nature. Destructive Revelry, because Master of the Unseen is the most miserable thing. And also, of course, destroys stuff like Courser Crufix. There's a lot of play to Destructive Revelry that isn't really obvious at first. It destroys Whip of Erebos. There's a lot of cool things this card does. There's your Wild Slash. It's just shock with a sweet little bonus on top. And it's a World Waker for the Planeswalkery goodness when you have those long matches and you have the control matches. Then it goes to the Reveler, same reason. Like, just Planeswalkers are difficult to deal with from those decks, and for a very good reason, because like that's sort of like one of your angles of attack against those type of decks. And it's really cool how Planeswalkers have really carved that niche into... They're super great in aggro decks. Then they're really good in control decks, because the control Planeswalkers do a lot of control things, but they don't do the same things, and as a result, they're used in different ways, which is great. And hey, there's Roast, because getting roasty and toasty. Green Red Aggro turns into 7th place Tom the Boss Ross with Bant Heroic. Gotta love it. Battle-wise Hoplite, favorite Hoplite. This is just your classic heroic deck. Hero of Heroics to make everything cheaper. And a card that I saw doing serious work this weekend. Serious freaking work. Put the stuff on his back and just carried him right up the mountain. Laguna Band Trailblazer was out on turn 1 and just kept getting boosted and boosted and boosted, and all of a sudden there was an Ordeal of Heliod, and there was an Ordeal of Thassa, and then there was Sinner Soul on top of Defiant Strikes and Dramoka's Command, which is really the only reason he's playing green at all. Like, we're starting to see these commands be so good. You splash for an entire color just so you can play them. You see a Targus Command, you see Dramoka's Command. These cards have been pushed big time. 4 different options that are all good. Like, there's just so much play to these cards. It's ridiculous. God's Willing is amazing, and a Singleton Treasure Cruise to get you through that sort of long game action. And this is a super cool deck. I love it. I think the mana is a little, it's a little, it's tough. You can kind of suffer under that, 1 forest type 4 mana confluence thing, depending on your draw. But no doubt about it, Bant is a way to go with this deck. Dramoka's Command gives you so much play. It's unbelievable. Not only are you getting the bonus, when you target your heroic creature, because they normally get a +1/+1 counter, and for Battle-Wise Hoplite, you're getting to scry and whatnot, but you also get that additional counter from the command itself, if that's the mode you choose, and usually you're going to give a +1/+1 counter to your dude and fight one of theirs. And so you'll get the heroic trigger, the counter, the fighting, all that happens in the way that you want it to. Super, super good. You have another Trailblazer here. Obviously, this is very good against aggressive decks, and Mono Red Aggro in particular, where they want to kind of get things going on turn 1. Like this guy, he gums up the ground real fast, and they have a real big problem getting rid of him if you target him maybe twice at most. Monastery Mentor, great card, is able to do a lot of work. It's able to kind of keep up with the token decks, because you can kind of, you're targeting with the Defiant Strike, and then you're getting to the token. They all have prowess. They're all able to sort of pump each other. Super powerful card. Encase in Ice is great. It is an answer to a Stormbreath Dragon, because, White-Blue Heroic was just like, oh my god, I can't really deal with that card. And now they gave you an answer to it. So high five. Which is great. And it has Flash, which is even cooler. So, you can actually wait on the Stormbreath Dragon and then use it right when they play the stupid thing, so that they don't get in that free swing. Ordeal of Heliod is fantastic in terms of gaining life, and this is one of those where, again, it's not quite Feed the Clan missing, but certainly not respected as much as it could have been. And I thought that did a great job in terms of showing that these spells give you value on top of value, are great with heroic creatures, and are great for kind of keeping you in the game. A lot of games that you can just lose otherwise. Ajani's Presence is great against removal. Crux of Fate, yeah, sure, whatever, thanks. Hero's Downfall, yeah, whatever. It's just great against a lot of heavy removal decks. Stubborn Denial great against control decks, because it's easy for you to get something down early, get it into a 4 power, and then just kind of sit there and wait for them to try to dissolve something, try to Crux of Fate, try to resolve a Planeswalker, whatever it is, and you can just sort of stop that in its tracks. Treasure Cruise for the really long games. And the really sort of grindy matchups, and of course Temple Enlightenment if you just need one more land, particularly for control matchups where you're trying to have a mana base and be able to kind of build up your mana over time. Really sweet. A typical Tom Ross deck. It's got 21 lands in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, the guy doesn't run a lot of lands. He's just that good. That's how it works. So to finish out our top 8, we have Green Red Aggro from Van Nguyen. And I might be saying that wrong, Van Nguyen. I want to say that they had this guy on coverage, and this was actually pronounced differently. Regardless, this is very similar to what we had looked at earlier. And again, we have 3 Dragon Claws, which are amazing. I love this now. I'm starting to think, you see this twice. You're pretty sure this isn't a typo, and I can imagine it wouldn't be twice in a row. I love it. This guy has seen play. That makes me so happy. You have no idea. Absolutely love this card. It's a big beat stick. This is the guy that punched the bear. He punched the bear. So, pow. You want that guy in your life. You want that guy on your team. That's what you want. This has Draconic Claws. You got your Crater's Claws going. Again, 4 Crater's Claws. How many Crater's Claws is in this stupid top 8 is ridiculous. Plenty of roasts, as you see. Now, the sideboard here has a few options that we hadn't seen before, which is like Whisperwood Elemental. You see Whisperwood Elemental. This guy has reach. He takes over boards like long term. This guy is great. Destructive Revelry, again, we've talked about this, destroys all the Mastery of the Unseen and the Whip of Ereboses and all this sorts of dumb stuff, like Courser Crewfix and whatnot. Wild Slash, get old-fashioned shock. Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker, amazing against control, just runs in the battlefield, turns into a dragon, hits them in the face, pass the turn. Xenagos the Reveler is what you want to play right before you play your Dragon Speaker, so you can get your 2/2 haste. Next turn you play Sarkhan, then you have your another 2/2 haste, so you're spending them with 2/2 hasters, and Sarkhan is a dragon, and that's awesome. Arc Lightning, Barrage of Boulders, Roast, we've all seen these before, and they all have their same sort of spots in the metagame where you kind of adjust your deck just a little bit to try to kill those things. I wanted to point out a few other decks, not just the top 8, before I go here. Jund Midrange is really sweet, mainly because everyone voted on this deck. People voted in Gerard's article, what are you going to play this weekend? And they voted this, and he got 9th. Like, that is amazing. Gerard is super, super good at Magic, and I think you see when he just kind of puts these decks together, and he's like, you know what? I can just win with anything. I can win no matter what you like, no matter what you choose. I'll take this, and I'll play it to the best of my ability, and when he's that good, he can always generally do well. What you see in this one is it's not quite a Sultai Reanimator deck, but it's really just sort of like it has some green cards instead, which, you know, help you play like Dragon Lord of Tarka as a one of. You guys your Courser Crewface Sylvan Carriated, which is nice, and your Sylvan Satyr Wayfinders to kind of get stuff in the yard. So, you know, Satyr Wayfinder does a ton of work in this deck, because what you really want to do is you want to sacrifice Satyr Wayfinder to Sidisi Undead Vizier. You like this guy, like just as a 5-mana 4/6 Death Touch, amazing. Exploit, ridiculous, because then if you drew a card off Satyr Wayfinder and you sacrifice it to Sidisi, I mean, you're going to a trip to Value Town that is just like holding your car down. There's so much there. It's like weighing you down. It's tough. Soul of Innistrad is amazing. Both, you know, when you cast him, they have to deal with him immediately. Otherwise, he's into the yard, and all of a sudden you're playing mana, and you get to exile him and get all this stuff back, which is great. You have sort of like one of Doomweight Giants. Like that's where I'm like okay. I mean, it's fine, I guess. Like you do have Whip of Erebos. It's not quite Jund Reanimator, but it does have a whip in there, which is amazing for Thoughtseize. Again, like how good is it in Standard? It's always good in Standard. Wizards, okay, really, okay. I don't know why you do this to us, guys, because it's just like these infinite play. It just messes up a whole bunch of decks and a whole bunch of sort of strategies. Now that could also be part of the reason they have it there, which is great, but still. You know, Outpost Siege seeing man deck play is awesome. I love this card. I love the fact that seeing a bunch of play. Apex Predator is awesome. Like, my Planeswalker destroys your Planeswalkers. It's making 3/3s. It's super, super powerful. Ugin is in here. Ugin, as it should be, not quite top 8, but he should be top 8 because, you know, he's a feathered winged dragon, which is weird. Xenagos, obviously, as we'd spoken, is awesome. Reclamation Sage, again, a good card against all the things, against the mirror. Again, I want to never see another Mastery of the Unseen in Standard. I like the fact that it made that happen, and then I want to never see it again. Doomwake Giant, again, sort of get 2 of those. They're great against tokens. Like, this guy is dumb against tokens, and then you play like the second one, it's just game over. It's ridiculous. Bile Blight is also good against tokens, also good against just spot removal. Your aggressive decks of all types. Here we kind of have a bunch of cool stuff. Now, Dragon Lord Kalagon, this is awesome. This creature is super powerful. I didn't think it was going to see a lot of play. I think they just kind of kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. It's hard to not see a lot of play, I guess, in some ways. You know, I think this is kind of a card that kind of goes over the top. You know, a card that is great against the mirror match, against another deck that is trying to put a lot of cards in their graveyard and use them as best as they can. Kalagon really, really makes them suffer for that, and I think that's really sweet. Farika, God of Affliction, is another great mirror card. You can exile a card from an opponent's graveyard if you absolutely have to give them a Death Touch guy, or you just fill up your own graveyard, and then you just get your own creatures, which is sweet. We talked about Worldwaker, great against Control. Drown in Sorrow, great against tokens, great against Manifest, great against sort of aggressive quick decks. Duress to go on top of your 4 Thoughtseize when you absolutely must destroy. Control and Read the Bones is very similar when you need all that card advantage after they keep sort of 1-for-1ing you in the early game. You can kind of use that along with cards like Tassiger to sort of pull ahead, which is sweet. So let's see, I think there was one more that I wanted to talk about. There's an Esper Control list we'll get to in a second. I wanted to talk about Todd Anderson's Jeskai Tokens. He's been super high on this deck. He's been playing it for a while. He thinks it's one of the best decks in Standard, if not the best deck in Standard, and he did play it very well. So being 11th place, I mean, he was basically a winning in, and maybe at 11th place could have been close enough. He just lost some tiebreakers. But anyway, I love Dragon Lord Jutai. I wish I had rated a little bit higher and was a little bit more excited about it when we first reviewed it, but I still think it's a great card. It is super powerful. It is fantastic, obviously, with Jeskai Ascendancy, because any non-creature spell you play is going to untap it and, of course, give it bonuses. Anything that hits a player and draws a card is generally good when it does it in this manner, which is essentially playing Anticipate. So when you hit them, you anticipate them, and Anticipate is great because it lets you do so much cool stuff. It just lets you leave up mana. So you can play Raise the Alarm if you have to, or you can just play Anticipate, and that's fine. You know, you have Secure the Waste, which is an interesting card to add to this. He only has a couple in here, but it's basically, and I was researching this, kind of like the best token producer ever made, mana-wise, in terms of like mana efficiency, mana in, tokens out. Like, it's basically the best, and it's weird to me that that's not like overwhelmingly awesome, but it's still seeing play and it still did well. So there you go. Stoke the Flames, again, best burn spell in Standard. There you are. Not to quite go over the rest of these. Wild Slash we talked about. Whirling Outburst is obviously fantastic with Jeskai Ascendancy, because the more tokens you have, the more you can untap them and make them awesome, and yada yada. Treasure Cruise is, you know, like when you're like sacking all your fetch lands, playing all your spells, playing your Anticipates, because who cares? At the end of their turn, if they're not going to do anything, you'll just Anticipate, and that's awesome. You can always get those cards back. The sideboard kind of shores up a lot of matchups. It seems to shore up a lot more control matchups with your Disdainful Strokes, your Negates. You have another Dragon Lord of Jutai, which is great against them. Elspeth, when you kind of need to go toe-to-toe and go above them. Narset Transcendent, again, when they're not playing threats early, Narset can just take over the game really, really quickly. Glare of Heresy, because Siege Rhinos have to die amongst other random white permanents. And Seismic Rupture, again, this is the tech that Chris Van Meter was running, and I couldn't think of the name of earlier. But Seismic Rupture is fantastic. It destroys tokens, even if they have tokens and they have a Jeskai Ascendancy and they have one spell that they can pump all their dudes with. Well, those 1 damage Barrage of Boulders cards don't do as much, and you basically have to rely on that Ferocious trigger, or you may not be able to attack or even kill them at all, whereas this still works. Whisperwood Elemental, this still works. Like, this card is sweet, does a lot of cool things. I'm glad it exists, and you know, I think that Dragons added this in a very specific way, and I'm glad it's here. So, last thing, let's see here. Last deck I want to talk about today is Esper Control, because hey, like, there's not a lot of control in this like entire list here. It's just aggro, 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 mid-range, aggro, aggro tokens, aggro, aggro, aggro. That's just all it is. So, lastly, let's talk about Esper Control. Dragon Lord of Jutai in the house, which is great. Silumgar the Drifting Death. It's really interesting to me that there's like Silumgar being played, and you kind of have to define which one it is, and often Silumgar can be played in the same deck. 2 different Silumgars. There's the Dragon Lord and there's the Drifting Death. They both have their their pluses and minuses. Flying and Hexproof by itself is huge. 3/7 is monstrous, and if they have tokens, obviously you're just destroying those real fast. A card I want to point out in particular is Silumgar Scorn. The whole reason I want to talk about this deck. This card is really sweet. Again, because it has the clause of in your hand or in play. So this is basically a counterspell a huge majority of the time based on your opening hand. Just based on your opening hand. You have 4 dragons in your deck, so there's already a high percentage you're going to be drawing it. And Silumgar Scorn, you can just like you can wreck people with just 4 spike. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just at least 4 spike. But when it's not, and it's just counterspell, it feels like counterspell. It feels kind of like, I don't want to say cheating, but it feels like you kind of transported back to like 10 years ago, or even 15 years ago, when you're like, I will just pay 2 blue and stop whatever it is you're doing. So it's cool that design can lead you to a place where, you know, you want to play dragons because the dragons are so good you can't really not play them. And here are spells that reward you for doing so. And then I think maybe it's, you know, Silumgar Scorn and it's cards that make Surrak Dragonclaw that much more powerful, because all of a sudden it can't be countered. Nothing you're playing can be countered, and that's super important when cards like this can just wreck your face for good old-fashioned 2 blue. And there's such a huge disconnect for how good it feels, or how bad it feels to get something dissolved, which is a fine counterspell, 3 mana. That's your going rate and has been for a long, long time. Versus saying, you know what, here's 2 blue. Here's 2 blue, counter your spell. That is, you know, that's legacy play. That's not even modern play. Like, this card is very, very powerful. Otherwise, it's just full of spot removal. Obviously, Bile Blight wants to get, you know your X for 1s based on your tokens. but you have Ultimate Price, which is killing a thing, Utter End, which is exiling a thing, and Crux of Fate, which is wiping the board, which is great with Narset Transcendent because you can -2 her, Crux of Fate, and the next turn you're guaranteed to get a Wrath of God, and you untap with Narset. It's going to be real good, real quick for you as you get 2 dig through times, maybe 2 Heroes Downfalls, 2 Utter Ends. I mean, there's all sorts of sweet spells that you're able to get rebound on. In the sideboard, you have Pearl Lake Ancient, a card that got the pie directly into the face area. If you see the other videos on my channel, you'll be able to see that. It's PieBet 2.0 is the name of that video. Encase in Ice, again, you have to stop Stormbreath Dragon somehow, like you do, and you got to stop Dragon Lord Atarka because, oh my god. Virulent Plague, one of the best, probably the best token hoser ever printed. I mean, Engineer Plague was one thing, but this is just like all the tokens, just kill all of them, just make them die, and they just dead. Nyx Fleece Ram, probably the best thing you do against aggressive decks, certainly mono red decks. You want to gain that life quickly and sort of have something back every turn that's gaining you life to sort of stop them from getting you. Dragon Lord's Prerogative, because Opportunity is a card. It may take a little bit longer for us to see more copies of this card played, and we may have to kind of work ourselves out of the incredible amount of aggressive decks we have in the format right now. But when we do, if and when, it's going to be super sweet because this card is really great. And again, we have this, we have this clause that when it matters in control mirrors, like it super matters. And being able to like just power through their negates, power through their Solemnguard Scorn, you just don't care. You know what I mean? You're just like, I'm going to draw 4 cards, and you show them a dragon, and you're like, deal with it. This is what's happening in my life right now. So your negate obviously wins your control mirrors. There's Jutai's Command, which has done a ton of work. I saw it do some really sweet work on camera this past weekend. And it it was returning cards back to play. It was countering a creature spell. Like it was doing a lot of good work. It's not Cryptic Command. It was never supposed to be, and it was never sort of meant to be. But a lot of people, I think, sort of still had that expectation, even if they didn't want to sort of voice it. They were like, man, it does 4 different things. It's blue-white. It's got to be crazy good. It's just good. It's not crazy good. It's just good, and I'm okay with that. That's fine. There is your Dragon Lord Solemnguard. Amazing in trumping sort of like the big mana decks, the control decks. It's like, okay, they get their Elspeth up to ultimate range. You take it with Solemnguard, you ultimate Elspeth, and then you have the emblem, and that's ridiculous. Card is very powerful and very good. So, and of course, lastly, Dry on Sorrows to kill all the aggressive things and sort of keep you in the game early so you don't just die immediately. So there are more deck lists here, but generally they're, we've talked about most of them. And again, this for me is an opportunity for me to bring you guys more content. I want to do some more streaming. I want to do some more recording. And ultimately, I hope you guys like it. And if you do, let me know. And if you don't, let me know sort of some feedback on what you guys would like, because I'm always listening and I'm always interested. So thanks a lot. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is Evan Irwin tapping the cards so you don't have to.